My name is Brian Taylor. I am the head of Biopharma Solutions at SmartLabs. I've been in biomanufacturing now for about 25 years. I was previously the GM for Biomanufacturing Solutions at GE Healthcare, which was focused on turnkey manufacturing solutions for the monoclonal antibody space, and actually started my career up in South San Francisco at Genentech. And at SmartLabs, what we're doing is really developing that next generation of infrastructure that is going to be required to support the discovery, the development, and the production of these modern therapeutics. I mean, the reality is that these therapeutics require a different type of infrastructure to support them. And what they really need is they need flexibility and they need to be dynamic. Building large static infrastructure in a space where there's so much change and innovation happening really doesn't do that justice. And so what we've developed is a platform that can actually adapt and change with the changing needs of science. And I'm guessing that most everybody in this room has also been around and seen what it felt like when they thought they knew what they needed, they went to build something, and then by the time it was done being built, that wasn't what they needed anymore. And so making sure that we start to move away from that to where what you build can actually change with you as you need it is what we're focused on at SmartLabs. So, and today what we're going to be talking about is we're going to be talking about some of the challenges with production of these cell and gene therapies. Trying to really identify the challenges and start to think about the solutions and the options that we need to address those. So real quickly, I'm just going to open it up for an introduction from the panelists. So Wolfram, if you'd start, that'd be great.
Happy to do so. Thank you very much for having me here. Yeah, my name is Wolfram Carius. I hesitate to say, but I'm already 34 years in the pharmaceutical industry, so whatever that means is your conclusion. I worked in North and South America, US and Asia, and I was extremely happy to be part of a team of more than 20 launches of products in the past, mainly on the monoclonal antibody side, working for Boehringer, working for Sanofi, and the last 6 years, I'm working with and for Bayer. And Bayer probably mainly known for new chemical entity part. I had with our team the unique chance to start the cell and gene therapy endeavor and our journey. We are at the very beginning, but with cell therapy, it's about Pluroc, and with gene therapy, it's with AskBio, and our strategic partner for gene editing is Mammoth, and we're moving things forward. We just talked a bit about before we came to the podium, so we have a pipeline of around 7 now, next year probably 9 clinical programs to run, and more than 20 on the preclinic. And I'm always amazed what the learnings are, seeing it also here on the Mesa, and what the speed is where this area is really moving forward. So very nice to be here and hope to contribute.
It does.
All right. Good morning. Thank you all for coming this early. I'm Justin Scoble, Vice President of Technical Operations at Caribou Biosciences. We're a small but growing clinical stage biotechnology company. We're focused on CRISPR genome-edited allogeneic cell therapies. We have one program in phase 1 clinical trials, which is going quite well. It's called CB10. And I've been in the industry for about 20 years working at small and medium stage biotechnology companies. But we are looking forward to moving our first asset through the development pipeline in allogeneic cell therapies. We think that allogeneic cell therapies are the future for cell therapies, and I think we're starting to see the data come out that looks very promising. So, cheers. Here.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Yuan. I'm the Chief Technical Operations Officer at Sigilon. Prior to Sigilon, I was in Bluebird 270 Bio, leading the process and analytical development team, helping them transition the 4 products from late stage to commercialization. And prior to that, I was in Biogen, BioVerative, Sanofi through a whole series of spin-offs and acquisitions. I like to say that my career started off, I'm kind of moving upstream. I started out in manufacturing sciences and in commercial products, and then clinical products, and now I'm in preclinical. So it's been quite a journey. Sigelon was founded in 2016 based on seminal studies from Bob Langer and Dan Anderson at MIT. We make genetically engineered cells that has therapeutic effects, and we encapsulate them to protect the cells from immune reactions. We went to our first clinical trial was in hemophilia A. That ultimately was not a successful clinical trial. However, we learned a lot, because for an allogeneic product, really the true test is going into humans. So we learned a ton from that clinical trial, how to improve our platform, and we're applying these improvements to our future products.
Terrific. So I think we'll just jump right into questions. Like I said, I'll start with a specific question for each one of you, and then I'll open it up for your own perspectives across the panel. So real quickly, we'll start with Wolfram. So Wolfram, as you think about the moving into production of these cell and gene therapies, what do you see as the largest technical challenges that you face?
Yeah, let me start that way. I think we see a few common challenges where that's really independent even on cell and gene therapy, and we see, of course, specific challenges for the less mature cell therapy side. So what I see in both areas is certainly that there is an exponential growth of knowledge, so speed really matters for both areas. Means on the other side that this fast learning, as you just alluded to, has to match with currently with a lack of experience, because we are not in this field. So the S-curve of technology, cell therapy is at a very infancy. Gene therapy is a bit more advanced, but still on an exponential growth of knowledge. And lack of experience, lack of analytics, lack of standards, this is a challenge. And of course, the people here sitting in front of us are mastering that. And that is, I think, where I have highest respect. The second I see is it's really all about people. So if we have not the right people, if we have not enough of experienced or over time experienced people, this area will not be successful. And that is probably one of my biggest concern, because I'm very clearly convinced that you can build a business around people, but not the other way around. So third, to add on that, I think it was said yesterday on the panel, to build something not asset specific, but really a platform is very important, in my opinion, for the future, not to reinvent the wheel any and each time. So we need to understand what platform really means and how to make that robust, reliable, and really competitive. Specifically, if you ask the technical challenge, what I see with our companies, what I see with many others is our investment into comparability is probably lagging. Comparability on the data side, be it on early lab to a later lab, to a scale, to manufacturing, but also the interrelation and connections between clinical trial, you referred to that, and the manufacturing and development side, because that's a circle, and we are not used to that in industry to that extent to react fast. Maybe two last points, not to go into too much specifics, but the world changed. We shortly discussed that also before. For us in Europe, we are closer to the challenges of energy and having a war in our region, which nobody thought that could happen, but it is the case. And post-pandemic, plus that event, accelerated a lot of things, a lot to the positive on the technology side, but definitely on the supply chain, a reorientation, be it on trade, be it on supply, be it on IP issues, being US on one side, being Europe close to US, but definitely also different approaches, China nearly separate, and Asia. So our common global approach, which we loved and built on for decades, probably will be gone for quite a time. And last not least, I think what comes to my mind is when I hear also the discussions on the Mesa this year, I think companies have not found the right balance when to invest in what and how much to invest. We see these circles, so, oh the hell, we are missing manufacturing, we don't have capacity. Then everything goes to investment, and now, okay, we have to invest more in clinics, so what we do with manufacturing. So this is a cycle you can exactly show for monoclonal antibodies 26 years ago, exactly the same. And I don't understand why one cannot be more clever thinking to build key core capabilities, which you need, for example, in the CMC side, but then work in closer collaboration with very capable CDMOs we have in the world, which see not only your product, but see 40, 50 products, and the learning curve is much steeper, which might not be so decisive in 10 years from now, but in this years it is.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes great sense, and Justin, some perspective from you would be great.
Sure, yeah, there are a lot of challenges out there. I think the challenges are different for different modalities, but I think harmonizing on, I think automation is getting there for a lot of the autologous space, and it's not quite there yet for the allogeneic cell therapies. Everyone's doing their own thing. It would be nice if we could develop platforms that worked more broadly, I think, for the allos. Larger scale automated would be fantastic, and then harmonizing on what our strategies are, what our regulatory requirements are. They seem to be evolving pretty rapidly over time, and so a number of things there to address as we mature as an organization.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, I want to just touch upon a couple things that Wolfram mentioned. One is people, right? Experienced people. I think in the past few years we have seen a lot of people from traditional biologics field and moving into cell and gene therapy. And then there are also a lot of people who are deep-rooted in cell and gene therapy. They understand a lot about the science, and but then the biologics people come in, they have a lot of experience in drug development. And I think that merging of these two groups of people have really propelled the advance of the therapies. But right now, I think we still have a significant shortage of experienced people. I think, given especially within the number and the concentration of the startups in a few hotbeds, right? And we're in Boston, and we really suffer from hiring experienced people to do the job, and that I think the concentration, the number of startups really thinned out that the people with experience. And then also in the past couple of years, during maybe it's pandemic or maybe it's just because the job market is so hot, people don't. It's really difficult to retain people, right? And then I am on the sort of advanced stage of my career. I feel worried for these young people who change their jobs every a year or 6 months, and how are you really going to learn, right? How are you really going to learn the trade, especially in the CMC side? Experience comes with doing. That I think that's a challenge. I don't know if I have a solution for that. Maybe the recent market readjustment might help stabilizing the workforce a little bit. We'll see. The other thing is, I think, unique challenge in the cell and gene therapy was that, particularly for cell therapy, when the products are cells, we don't really understand much, right, in terms of the property of the cells and how it's going to perform in the clinic in human, and also again, it goes back to the early stages of monoclonal antibodies, where we say the process is the product, and so much more true, right, for cell therapies, that how the experience of the cells through the manufacturing process really determines the property and the potency and the efficacy of the cells. And that's something that we don't understand. But I think there's a huge amount of opportunity, especially in the autologous therapy, where every single batch goes to a patient. So you can really get a lot of data, if you start to build that, if you start to think in that direction, you can build a really large data set really quickly. Whereas in the monoclonal antibodies, you scale up the process, and one batch of drug substance goes to thousands of patients. It's really hard to see the product to the clinic correlation. Whereas in autologous therapy, you can build up that data set quickly. I think that as an industry, we should really start thinking about that early on to collect that data set. And it doesn't matter whether you think this data point is needed or not. Just start collecting it, and someday you might see the pattern with the advancement of AI and modeling tools that we have nowadays.
For sure. And so maybe just to build off of what Wolfram was talking about a little bit about the investments, and the question to you, Sarah, as a preclinical company, how you do your investments is critical, right? And there are certainly cost challenges with how you do that and how you go into that. So can you talk a little bit about the cost challenges that you're facing?
I think everybody has.
Or we all are facing, I guess.
We're all facing cost
challenges. That's exactly right.
Yes, I think that, again, speaking from a CMC side, I think we've come, as an industry, we come a long journey to realize that you really have to build CMC early on. And I'm starting to see some of the startups now putting CMC as really strategic, position. So that's a great change. The challenge is that for manufacturing, right? You're talking about ultimately manufacture your product somewhere to supply to patients before you even know what your product looks like. So I think that makes the strategy difficult to design. Do you build or do you buy, right? There are generally speaking two types of options you can go. Do you build your own manufacturing facility, or do you go to a CDMO? If you don't, each of them, let's say building, it would take a long time and a lot of investment. From your decision is made to the facility being fully validated, that's at least a year, right? Even if it's just a very simple clean room. But also, finding the CDMO, finding the right CDMO, and also get the contract right, and then you can start the tech transfer. That also can take up to a year sometimes. And so I think, no matter which way, I think it's a very personalized decision for each company. Which way you go, you have to start thinking about it way in advance. So.
Yeah, and Wolfram?
I just to add on, honestly, I think we need to develop further in just having if it's left or right. And I think in a phase where this exponential growth of knowledge, it counts that you get as much experience you get into your own development. I don't think you should ever give your own development completely in hands of others because you don't understand how the product really, this interaction, it's about safety first for me, then it's also about efficiency. But on the other side, to let this knowledge being aside and develop only your own product is neither a very intelligent decision either. So there must be a way where you develop this and get access to this knowledge and to this data. I think you said that rightly so. Early on, working with a partner, but being part of this development. And I think the CDMOs, at least a few I see, and if I talk about CDMOs, I'm talking about CDMOs who have a strong D and have their capabilities. It's not really about capacity only. Actually, I think over time it's less about the capacity. I think there are new models, both in US as in Europe, how you could really solve that problem and not making a decision too early to invest, because it's, as you said, about your people, about the experience, or to bring that up. And you should not be derailed from your product development at that time, which is much more important. Otherwise, we see that at the FDA approval, many people arrive then at a stage where the FDA say, look, that is not even the minimum requirement you have met on the CMC part. And that cannot be that our part CMC is so rate limiting for that field.
Justin?
So my perspective, having grown up at much smaller companies than the ones you've worked at, is a little bit different, I think. And I think for me, I think it's important to understand your product. And so we've always built out process development, analytical development as an internal capability. And then we work with our CDMO partners to do the GMP manufacturing because they're very expensive facilities to build, as you mentioned, and maintain and operate. And when you're doing early clinical work, you need a few batches to get into phase 1 clinical trials. And so then you have this facility that you built, and then it's not being used appropriately. So our perspective is, of course, understand your product, work on it, and collaborate with your CDMO partners so that you can bring expertise to them and you leverage their expertise. We work in a complex industry where our allogeneic gene-edited products require specialized manufacturers for many different components that go into the process. And so, building a clean room is completely insufficient, right? I need to be able to do oligonucleotide synthesis and viral vector manufacturing and all these other things that need to all come together. And so we don't have that expertise internally, and we work with partners who have platforms, right, who are experts in making that particular modality. And leveraging their expertise, and that's really I think, and then we bring it all together and make innovative therapies.
Yeah, I think, and on the fact that these are processes that are highly technical, that are challenging, that require deep knowledge in order to do. I think we all know that we're in the industry learning, but it's not just us that's learning; it's also the regulators that are learning, right? And so maybe talk a little bit, Justin, about some of the regulatory challenges that you see with this.
Yeah, so there are a number of regulatory challenges in the cell therapy space. One of which, again, we're working on right now is so with our allogeneic cell therapies, the regulators have kind of gotten used to autologous, where there's there are now a few approved CAR T therapies, and they decided that they would regulate the viral component of that, pretty stringently, treat it as if it's a drug substance, right? And as we're developing our allogeneic products, they've kind of used that same model for all of the components that we use to do our genome engineering. So, what I would think of as a reagents, pardon my, our CRISPR genome editing tools are now being regulated the same way as the virus or the cell therapy itself. So, we have to process validate every one of our oligonucleotide guides, the proteins that the Cas proteins we use to do the genome editing. And so when you think about launching a product then, instead of having to do one process validation, I have to do 6 for one product. And that becomes prohibitively expensive and a regulatory challenge, and I'm not sure that that's appropriate, right? So I think we do need to educate the regulators on the barriers we're going to have to see as we make these therapies more complex.
Sarah?
Yeah, I think that's very interesting. I think what my eye-opening experience the first time it was with my first IND in cell therapy, right? It's an ex vivo lentiviral vector edited, cell therapy product, and look at the IND template, and how do you even fit your LVV plasmids? It doesn't fit in the traditional IND structure that is set up for biologics, and so I think some of that. LVV is considered now widely as a drug substance, and or mRNA. If it's a RNA edited cell therapy, these are all considered drug substance now. Partly probably because it's the way the IND struct template is fit, and people, had to force fit their products into that. But unfortunately, then it locks us into a view of, when you make a process change in LVV, then you have to revalidate the process later on. So I've been always very cautious about how do you designate each component of your product whether it's a drug substance, whether it's a drug product, whether it's an excipient. I think those are things that people really should think very carefully. And also, there's interact meetings, pre-IND meetings. There's plenty of time to bring that up with the agency if it's not clear. Really get that clear so that you don't lock yourself into a undesirable situation later on when you make changes.
Yeah.
Wolfram?
I want to give it a positive spin. No, I think I'm very motivated by seeing what happened during the pandemic, and if we can put 10% or 50% of this collaboration and interaction from the pandemic time into today's normal reality in between regulatory authorities and us as product development companies, it would help enormously. Because we start with a CMC as, it's just not wrong. It's just not right. It's wrong because these living organisms we are dealing with, it's not the process where you say, okay, you once define it best forever. Sorry, that's not the case. The variability of the raw material, which are not 100% understood and will not be understood in 6 months from now, will influence how we probably have to control the process. Process control has to get better, analytics have to get better, I could not agree more, but it's not that you fit once and then you have filed it once and then it's done forever. That will just not be the case. So I think this interaction, I see openness, much more openness after the pandemic in both sides of the ocean at least, and I'm cautiously positive that those challenges and problems could be brought on the table, and with more and more people understanding also and on the regulatory side, it will develop to, let's say, a framework. I don't want to say standard, to a framework which will allow to, let's say, really understand what makes the difference for efficiency and safety and what just is a formality which does not help, actually hinders innovation.
Yeah, and so as you think about this, and we were talking earlier about the fact that if there was a silver lining to the pandemic, it is that it really accelerated what we are doing. And the pace of innovation. And as you think about that, one of the things you have to make sure that you're keeping up with, and you alluded to it earlier, is that people development piece. Yeah. And making sure that you have the ability and the access to the talent that you need to run these processes. So talk to me a little bit about the challenges that you see there with people development and the acquisition of the right type of people that you need.
Yeah, and you alluded to that, not to be repetitive. It will not help in an area where you have such strong growth, such a need of people. There is not hundreds of thousands of people who have the experience for 5 or 10 years because the area is only 5 years old. So just face the reality. So what is the logic? If everybody is chasing the other's people, that will end up in nowhere. That doesn't help. We have seen that on the monoclonal side. We have seen that specifically on hubs like, for example, Singapore in the past. Mm-hmm. What we have done there is, okay, we have to come together in such hubs specifically, be it San Francisco, Boston, whatever is in Europe, and talk, what can we do together with academia, with government, and the companies to create a bigger pool? Because there's only one cake to divide. If you have a small cake and you divide it further, then you get subcritical for everybody. That doesn't work. So an institution like NIPRID in Ireland, and we're talking with various US and European companies to establish further education programs to attract young people early enough into the science, which is not given, by the way. As sexy we all find this area, talk with the people. I have 2 sons and a daughter on the age of starting their business and their work. Well, 1 of 3. So the others say, Dad, holy shit, never ever. I mean, I'm happy on IT and AI, but what you are doing, okay, man. So we have to motivate, we have to interact with this within the society to make the pool larger. And if I say people is really all about people, we talk in the companies, in our company too, about OPEX, about CAPEX, about A, B, F, C, and then we talk about, okay, people. Yeah, people is our first, but what's the investment? How many $1 million go really into education and building out that pool? It's a problem. It's really a problem. I'm coordinating the pharma manufacturing, the colleagues of the tech ops, of the top 20 tech ops, and it's one of our top topics, sustainability and people are the two top topics we try to address in a pre-competitive way.
Justin?
Yeah, I think hiring good scientists is and retaining them is a challenge. It seems to be less of a challenge than hiring good manufacturing operators and retaining them. Yeah. So what we've seen, is the really high turnover rates at our CDMOs, up to around 30% annually, which is insane, right? I mean, that is not sustainable, right? You train people up and then they stay for a little while, then they have some marketable skills and they go off. And so I do think that we need to work so we can incentivize people in our company with stock options and all the fun things that we can do to make it an exciting place to work. But when you then work with a partner who has this kind of turnover rate, it can become a real challenge. And I think one of the things that we think about, you mentioned education, and I think it is important, but I also think that a lot of it is vocational, right? So we don't necessarily need to hire people with degrees in biology or stem cells or whatever to come and operate in a clean room, right? Maybe we need to think outside the box of where we're looking to hire these people. Yeah. I heard an anecdote from one of my pharma partners where they hired somebody who had previously worked in a kitchen. Because he made really reproducible and delicious food, and was totally okay with getting a little better pay working, in a day shift in a clean room and making really reproducible product and
a recipe, right?
Follow the recipe. So I think that we might need to broaden where we're hiring from and think about how we train people differently. Obviously, some education is important, but not everybody needs to have a Ph.D.
Germany has fortunately good breweries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Wolfram and Justin mentioned. I do actually. You mentioned that there's a high turnover rate in the CDMOs, and we've had same experience, and that really adds to a cost, right? Especially if you're in the early stage clinical trial, you're not making that many batches, and you spend a tremendous amount of money on tech transfer, and then part of the tech transfer is training the operators to be familiar with your process. And then you go into clinical trial, you're only making a batch once a month or maybe every other month. And first of all, the trained operators are not that familiar with your process, and then some of them get up and leave, right? And then you end up spending a lot more time and money to train the new operators, and you always worry about are they going to make it this batch? So that's a challenge. I think that stabilizing the workforce again is really important. I think education. I think other means of doing that. My personal experience in being part of an internal manufacturing when I was in Biogen, I realized that the kind of experience that CDMOs don't necessarily get is the ownership. They don't feel, today they're making company A's product and tomorrow they're making company B's product. They don't know where they're going. They don't know what they're treating. They know they're important, not to say that the operators are not responsible. They're highly responsible. Everybody shows up at work wanting to do a good job, but they don't understand the impact of what they're doing to patients, to live human beings. I think, in the past, some of the those that we've done had been helpful was, going to a CDMO partner and telling them exactly what those patients are suffering from. Why are they so important? What they're doing, the operator in the CDMO, what they're doing on a daily basis, so important, so life-changing for these patients, has been very, very welcome by the CDMO. I think that companies can do more of those.
That's great, and I think we've lightly touched on across the board, I think, some of the tech transfer challenges, but maybe to get a little bit more into the details of that. So can you talk about some of the challenges that you face as you work to do some of that tech transfer?
Yeah, I think a lot of times when, again, you know, under the pressure of timeline, everybody wants to go to IND as soon as the product is developing research, and they say, when can we go into clinic, right? And just jump over that whole CMC piece. Of course, you know, and then the process development scientists have to look at whatever came out of the research and see whether or not we can scale that up, or can we make it more robust? Is it even GMP-able? And so we have to make a number of changes. So that there is, within the innovator companies, there is some collaboration between research and process development, and sometimes these are not easy collaborations to convince them that you have to change the process in certain ways in order for it to be tech transferable. And then while we're doing these discussions, we're already starting to talk to CDMO about tech transfer, and typically the CDMO would prefer a lot more certainty. They don't like to change, but we're still really trying to figure out how this whole thing works. So that puts the you know, tech transfer lead or the CMC team or process development scientists and analytical development scientists in a bit of a sort of center eye of the storm, right? They're being pulled in different directions. So it's not easy, and it takes a lot of time. And again, because of that sort of innovator versus, you know, client versus CDMO relationship, everything you change, it's a change order, and that on the business side, it also tends to slow down things. Those are the things I think Wolfram mentioned earlier, that if we can build a strong partnership, you know, with everybody meets in the middle of the road a little bit, that would be helpful for the industry.
Wolfram?
Yeah, and I think we have really to further develop that model. Just let me explain. I have had the chance at Sanofi to have a deeper look with accountability also for the vaccine part of Pasteur. And some of the learnings there, and which I think is specifically for cell therapy, maybe also for gene therapy, that we move the people with the product. So, I mean, every transfer is per definition a risk, right? I mean, even if the same people make the transfer, it's still a risk, but if you have then different people involved, it's obviously a risk. So a partnership needs to be the real true partnership. It needs to be a strong development organization on both sides. I agree that maybe there are CDMOs out which don't know what they're really doing, but in the sense of patient. Mm-hmm. There are CDMOs out, which we heard here also, which are even engaged in ultra-rare disease foundations and others. So I think that's the purpose is absolutely key, that the people have this purpose to make this your product, their product. But then it comes to the technicalities, and we have still a situation where we have poor understanding of our processes. We should be honest about that. So we don't have this control parameters all around. When the cells as living organisms it's so complex that we don't have our arms around. Mm-hmm. So with new models, I think moving more the product along that, and maybe even having models where we move people who are working at a CDMO to be the originators, people later. Mm-hmm. These models are starting to get established here in US, for example, and I think that's an interesting subvariant how it could work specifically on the gene therapy side first, and then we have to see about cell therapy.
Yeah. Justin?
Yeah, cell therapies are an interesting challenge it's different than I think other things, and I think sometimes it doesn't translate as well even from the process development lab into GMP manufacturing, and things that your PD team develops and they can do in a few minutes. So when you just do it in a GMP suite and you have to have verifiers and you're working on paper batch records, can take all of a sudden a thing that takes 30 minutes can take 3 hours, and your cells will be sitting out while this is happening, and sometimes they don't appreciate that. So so you have to think about your the challenges that you're going to have in the GMP suite in advance, and understand what those hold times, how long can they be sitting, and then work to streamline those, because yes, you'd love to get more data and run that next in-process assay, but they have to go back in the incubator. And so there's a lot that you can learn, and I think that cell therapies really force you to streamline. They will not tolerate, long hold times or put it in the fridge till tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, and so as you start to think about the things like release testing and stuff like that, I think those things start to play into your decision as to whether or not you're going to do your manufacturing yourself, or you're going to go to a CDMO, or you're going to look for a hybrid model of the two. How does that, in your mind, Justin, play into your decision making, that release testing?
Yeah. So there are people who say the process is the product. I believe the product is the product, and the way you determine that is through the tests, right? You prove that you've made what you think you've made. Those have become pretty complex and challenging when you're doing sophisticated genome engineering, and so we've kind of gone beyond what most CDMOs can do in terms of the analytics. That they just can't provide that kind of level of genomic integrity analysis, and so we need to work with specialized testing facilities that can give you high quality, submittable, high throughput sequencing, for example, and that's not something that most CDMOs offer, and usually small biotechs don't have the capacity to kind of qualify, validate those assays. So you have to work with specialty partners. So at that point, you're outsourcing your testing anyway. So it doesn't matter really whether you've done it internally, externally. Not so much. There are certain things that you need to do kind of real time, and so there have to be certain kind of core capabilities within the manufacturing suite for your in-process testing. Cell viability is a mainstay, but even in-process flow cytometry to understand the characteristics of your cells at the time that you're moving them through the process. And I think that there are certain competencies that need to be within the four walls of your manufacturing suite, but a lot of it afterwards to understand at a deeper level. I think we're going to have to work with a few specialized partners out there, and so in terms of analytics, there's a certain kind of base level, but then you can find specialized partners to do some of the more sophisticated tests, and you can do them either way.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think their product, different products are different, right? Some products, for example, let's say CAR T therapies and autologous CAR T therapies, the patients are waiting, so you really don't have the end-to-end time, the turnaround time is extremely important. And when you're working with if it's an outsourced model, working with a CDMO, you already have layers of quality. The CDMO need to release the product, and then your internal quality need to remove. So there's already that redundancy, that inefficiency built in because of that relationship. So how to streamline that end-to-end process means a ton at the end of the day for the patients. So I think my view is that if we need to work with a CDMO, I'd like for the CDMO to have as much testing capability as possible, so that we don't have to ship the product to 5 different CROs for release testing, right? Because every additional contract organization you have to work with, it's an additional inefficiency in terms of logistics of shipping the samples, in terms of reviewing the data, in terms of releasing the product. So as much as you can do a one-stop shop, it's the best. And if there are some really specific, highly technical assays that's developed in-house, but takes a long time to transfer out and qualify and validate those assays, then test it internally, especially for phase 1. You can do a phase-appropriate quality system and enable your analytical team to test those under the quality oversight, of course. I think that those would be my suggestion. Yeah.
Wolfram?
Well, little to add. I think I don't want to prolong it. I fully agree. The only hope I have is that, as you said, with collecting more and more and more data, that with advanced analytics and even algorithms on the AI, the development will be faster than we would imagine right now. And I remember well, it was a long time ago, but with the monoclonal antibodies I had always this picture of the iceberg, and we were all proud to have defined biologics. And if we look back, we say, oh, holy shit. What we defined as biologic at that time, I mean, we just haven't had the look at it. And then came MS, LSC, or others, and then suddenly the door opened a bit. I'm convinced that will happen here too, relatively fast. And that's, I think, as you said, and CDMO who does not invest in that, it wouldn't be, for me, not a partner. It's very clear. That is as for Bayer. So I think all said, I mean, I could not agree more. If you have 5, 6 different parties being involved, it gets really complex.
Yeah.
And so I think, and you said this too, Wolfram, about the fact that today our processes are far from robust. Yeah. They're not easy to transfer, and they're not easy to run, even by the companies that invented them, right? And so as you think about that, and this is a question for the entire panel, I think what we've got to do is we've got to develop multiple different options in order to how to tackle this. There is no, at the moment, one-size-fits-all solution for production of cell and gene therapies, right? And so, Wolfram, as you think about this, and to the people in the audience that are thinking, what should I do? Should I build a manufacturing site? Should I go to a CDMO? Should I look for some type of hybrid offering that gives me the ability to run my process within somebody's infrastructure? How would you recommend that they proceed? What would be your advice?
Well, look, first I would say what you said, cell therapy and gene therapy are two different animals in the sense of what we understand, how we deal with it. It's really different. Gene therapy is much closer to what I would call the classic biologics part. We know much more, it's more matured. So for the gene therapy, I would say it depends of your stage of the company. Do you have a product? Do you have a pipeline? So it's probably an interaction of working close with CDMOs, see if you get a proof of concept on the clinical side, if you have more, let's say, into the pipeline to develop to the same platform. Would I go out, take my money immediately and invest 150 million or 50 million for a facility at a time where I do not even have a proof of concept? Difficult, right? If you don't go and have no competent CDMO, you also lost because you don't know about the CMC part and you will not get the product to the market. So it's a bit of catch-22, but for gene therapy that can be solved, in my opinion, or is actually solved. Collaboration models must involve. For cell therapy, it's really difficult. I can only echo without going in detail how many stones we turn and how many surprises we see in cell therapy. I think it was said yesterday by Stout from BMS. I mean, each week is a new week, right? I mean, so each week is a surprise, each week a learning. This is too early to predict where this is going because the cell types are too different. And I would be very cautious to give a recommendation. There's a strong learning which you probably have to make first in-house and see, as you described it, what support you get from outside. But I'm sure if we sit here in 3 years, not in 5, this will have also changed. But at the moment, I don't see where we would have a universal approach standard to a cell therapy CDMO.
Sorry. I think that it depends a lot on what you're doing. And so, if I was doing autologous cell therapy, I think there are now companies out there with really robust platforms that you can plug into, and I think they can really accelerate your product development. I think with certain types of allogeneic CAR T therapies that we're working with, we have found CDMOs with the core competencies, with the processes and equipment that we use where we can leverage that. And then there's the new frontier of like iPSC-derived cell therapies, where that is much earlier in the companies that have any kind of competency at all is pretty rare. The timelines to do the manufacturing are very long. The processes are very poorly defined and very finicky. There's more art than science to a lot of it. And so in those circumstances, I think it really would benefit you to be able to have control of that manufacturing process yourself. And whether that means building your facility or working with someone who can provide you with a clean room space so that you can really manage that and be more flexible, right? So when you're working with CDMO, as you mentioned, having to do a change order every time you have to change that process. When it's a 3-month-long process, there's probably going to be changes every time you do it. And so being able to be more flexible and rapid with that, controlling it yourself, I think becomes much more attractive. And so I think it really depends on where you are on that spectrum, what the right answer to your CMC question will be.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think that I'm starting to see more clean room on demand business models coming up, and this is, how innovative this whole manufacturing space is. I think it's really welcome, because what we want with the limited rate as a startup, we want our people to focus on the core technology, the science, the process development technology, and all the facility management, all the materials management, all of that stuff I don't want my people to worry about, right? So in an ideal situation, if someone else can take care of all that, and then we send our highly skilled people who develop the process, who develop the assays, to go in and perform the batches, that would be, the best of the both world, I would say.
Yeah. So it looks like we've got just a little bit less than 10 minutes. So I just wanted to open it up for any questions from the audience for the panel. And we've got somebody moving around with the mic, so right up here.
So good morning. Thank you very much for your talk. It's really interesting. I have a question. Assuming that you are going to work with a CDMO and that this CDMO have the capacity, the installations, and the technology to perform your product, what would be, outside of these requirements, the top 3 requirements that you would like to find in your CDMO?
Sorry.
You should go.
Just jump right in, because I think well, people always say collaboration, right? Like a true partnership, as Wolfram mentioned earlier, that let's not identify ourselves as us versus them, right? If the CDMO makes a mistake, let's not just blame them for things. I think that true collaboration, and also from a CDMO perspective, allow the process development scientists and the person in plant to really be in the plant, as opposed to just view it through a window. I think an ideal world, the team should not even know who's working for which company, and they really work together as they all own the product and process. So that's number 1 for me. I don't know if I can think of the other 2, but you guys.
Yeah, I'm going to echo partnership, right, and spirit of collaboration, right. So those are what you need to look for. If it feels transactional, or if it feels like every time you want to improve something, you get pushback. That's you're not moving in the same direction. You're not aligned, right? So that's critically important. And then I think looking for CDMO partners that have deep expertise, so that you can learn from them as much as you teach them, right? So that they will come to you and say, hey, we think we can improve your process by doing X, Y, or Z step, or we've been working in the background on this thing, and we think maybe it would apply to this particular step in your process. Those kinds of innovations, are critically important for a successful partnership and moving, I think, accelerating your development pipeline.
All set.
Sounds good. Any other questions? Oh, sure.
Hi, thank you for the insights. My question is for Wolfram, and related to Europe. You mentioned energy problems. Could you comment on how the industry is planning to put contingencies around energy? Because I'm worried about this. I think that for large manufacturers, you need a stable energy situation, and I know that it's a huge problem coming up.
Yeah, and I mean, I cannot talk for the industry, but I know that all the CDMO, the large companies, have used the last month to really go deep into this matter to see what they can do, how they, for example, switch on the energy sources, how you get access to energy, which was not possible, and you see a lot of activities within the governmental space also between France, Germany, Spain, France, Spain, Germany, whatever. So it's or Norway and France and Germany. So I think the companies, I can definitely talk for Bayer. I was very positively surprised that at a certain time of, let's say, after 2.5 months, more than 95% of the problems have been solved and in a sense addressed. Is that a sustainable solution for the next 3 years? No. Is it a sustainable solution for the next 6 to 9 months? Yes. And I think that is if what I get as feedback from other, let's say, the companies who have large manufacturing sites in European space, that's exactly the same. So it's from environment, we go probably 1.5 steps backwards to what we wanted to do. But on the other side, there are also innovation triggered. So, for example, really new approaches coming with, let's say, on the green side, where people have great ideas and probably the money was not there to implement the first pilots. Suddenly it is there because there's no other choice. So I'm not worried for the supply on the pharmaceutical side in Europe at all, but it is enormous effort and a significant cost.
I don't want to, if I jump in for a second, I live only about a mile from the Bayer facility in Berkeley, and they have quite a large solar array. So they're doing something also for sustainability.
Great. I think we probably have time for maybe one more question.
Like if I survive receiving the microphone. So I think there's a theme throughout the whole week about not enough experienced people. So if you think about that, if we're assuming there aren't a bunch of people that know a ton about gene therapy, like hanging out in Saskatchewan or someplace that are just going to pop on the radar, it's going to take time, right? Because those people need to be trained. You can't flip a switch. And I guess what I maybe, and maybe I'm just not seeing it, but what I don't see it enough of maybe is, there are pockets of like universities that are starting to train people and things like that at the lower level. But even if you look at like a mid-level person, let's say you said, we talk about analytics. So there's a QC director sitting in a monoclonal antibody production facility and say, hey, this gene therapy thing seems to be taking off. But that person isn't going to walk out of the one company in a gene therapy and be productive instantaneously. There seems like there should be like, I don't know, like an ARM 6-week course on how to, I just don't see that happening where we're enabling people to move into this industry quickly because it's just sort of this anecdotal thing and people are just hand-wringing.
I could take it first, you're absolutely right. Sorry, I can't see the well. It's absolutely right. Without doing and facilitating this switch, and you made that point, it's not about, maybe my bad English knowledge, it's not about education only. It's a lot about, but it's more than training, right? It is giving some substantial knowledge and combining theory with practice. We see that starting. I could share about PPP private-public partnership which started, for example, in Germany, which is exactly dedicated to that. The nitrate part is, yes, it is dedicated. We're talking also about, in this pharma manufacturing forum, how to establish that on both sides of the ocean to work together, because it doesn't make sense that every of the top 20 does their own program either, right? And then we go against and for the same people. That doesn't make sense. And so it's not enough. Yes, we are at the 10% of the 100 needed. You're spot on, but I see it coming.
Great. Well, just want to say thank you to everybody for being here early this morning. Thank you to the panelists, and have a great race to the conference. Thank you.